Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another solo show of the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast. Excited to be with you all today to chat about the topic of habits, kind of the psychology of habits, why some clients see change and some don't, why some habits stick and others don't. Looking forward to the topic. I think whether you're a seasoned coach and been doing this for a really long time or just starting out, it will be valuable information for you to take with you through your client cases that might be a little bit more challenging, where thinking about habits could be beneficial. Okay, so let's get started. I think we've all had the clients, or if you haven't had any clients yet, you probably will at some point have a client or know a family member, a loved one that knows what to do. They know they need to drink more water. They know they need to move their body better. They know that they need to, stop snacking before bed. They know that they need to cut down on their alcohol. They know what they need to do. They might have general education or knowledge as to why, right? My liver numbers don't look great. I should stop drinking so much, or my cholesterol is high. I should stop eating fast food, right? There's at least a general understanding of what they should be doing and why, but they still struggle to follow through. And why is that? Well, knowledge alone won't create change. We know that as coaches. If it did, coaching wouldn't necessarily be necessary. It would also be a heck of a lot easier, and all clients would have transformation stories. So knowledge alone does not create change. So what does? Well, we know habits are a big part of this. And I think when a lot of people think about habits, they kind of think about motivation, okay? And how motivation will create better habits. However, that isn't always true. I'm going to kind of reframe your thought process around motivation and explore really why habits stick psychologically and how you can help your clients create that change that lasts instead of having to rely on motivation, because it isn't the most reliable tool. All right. So why isn't motivation enough? Well, motivation is a feeling, first of all, and we know feelings can change. So it's helpful, but it's unreliable. We can feel motivated by a trip. We could feel motivated by lab result that wasn't good. We can feel motivated by how crummy we feel. We can feel motivated because we lost someone that we love and we don't want that to happen to us. These are all feelings, and motivation can naturally rise and it can naturally fall. So if you believe I just need more willpower or I need better motivation, that isn't necessarily going to be a reliable tool for long-lasting change, okay? Consistency is going to outbeat that intensity of really high motivation at first. Again, feelings can be really high highs. They can also be really low lows. So sometimes days can be really high motivation, but then sometimes there's no motivation at all. How do we find a consistent middle ground? Okay. I think differentiating between what motivation is and what discipline is. So motivation, again, it's a feeling. It's the internal drive or desire to do something. You act because you want to. Maybe you feel inspired, excited, pressured. Typically, these motivation will come from setting goals or rewards or fear or passion, right? But the catch is it's inconsistent. So some days you have a lot of it and some days you have none. So we can't rely on something that inconsistent if we want long-lasting change. So what is more consistent? Discipline. Okay, that's about a behavior. It's your ability to take action even when you don't feel like it. Instead of relying on your mood, discipline relies on habits, routines, commitment, and it's steady and reliable, but it takes effort to build initially. Okay. And if you think about it in this way, motivation will oftentimes get you started, a feeling that you're really passionate about, whether it kind of be fear that motivates you, like, oh gosh, I had a friend that died young from a heart attack and I don't want that to happen to me. That is a fear-based motivation. I don't love those motivators, but that can help someone get started, and that's okay, right? But they do need the discipline to keep going. And discipline often comes from habits, because habits are the behavioral choices that we make every day to do something or not do something. And that habit and discipline cycle is initially what kind of gets us the first stage of results, and then we kind of continue to build on it. So sometimes those habits look really small in the beginning, but the best thing about habits and discipline is we can build on the intensity, on the level of discipline, on the amount of commitment that we're giving to these habits. So again, difference between motivation and discipline. Motivation's a feeling. Discipline is the behavior, and we want to rely less on motivation long term and build habits that create a lot of really disciplined behavior to prioritize our health and wellness. Okay, there's something kind of called the habit loop that I oftentimes think of when I'm trying to evoke change in a client's habits and behaviors. And it's typically that there's some sort of like cue or trigger that leads to a routine or a behavior that they're engaging in, and then a reward or a benefit, right? So it might look something like a client comes home and they feel stressed after work, so they start snacking, right? That's so the cue or the trigger is feeling stressed. The routine is snacking, looking at the fridge, opening, a pint of ice cream or grabbing a cookie or pouring a drink. That is the behavior. And then the reward is temporary comfort or relief. Keyword there is temporary. It is a temporary relief to the behavior and the feelings that arose from the trigger. Now, it's really important for you to be able to see these first, right? That might be happening with the client, but then for you to be able to show the client how this is manifesting in their life, right? And you want to do this in a way that kind of seems curious. Like, I'm just curious if you've noticed that it's really hard not to snack after dinner and why that might be. And maybe the client might say, I haven't noticed it and I don't know why it is. And you could say, okay, well, do you have any specific feelings that come up after dinner? Is it boredom? Is it anxiety? Is it frustration? Is there kind of like a feeling that you tend to get every night after dinner, right? And the client might say, oh yeah, I'm bored. And then that's kind of your segue into being able to talk a little bit about what the initial behavior, right, is that's leading to that outcome. So if we think about how, again, the boredom behavior translates, or the boredom feeling translates into the behavior of snacking, you can ask the client, what would it feel like to kind of just sit with the boredom? What happens when you're bored that you need to make that feeling go away, right? I've done episodes on asking questions and how that's important to getting the client to think about some of their typical behaviors. And so asking them questions as to whether or not they can even see some of the cycles that are happening, I think it's really important, because then they're able to kind of own it and see it for themselves, right? Instead of asking them like, why do you keep doing this? You can ask them, what need is this habit needing, right? You're looking to fill boredom. Why is boredom uncomfortable? Well, I don't like being alone. Okay, what does being alone make you feel, right? It's important to kind of get to the root of some of the feelings that drive the behaviors, okay? Because most habits exist because they serve a purpose. And if we can get to the bottom of what purpose they're serving, I think it's really helpful for the client to shift the behavior. Okay, let's next talk about some identity-based habits. So long-lasting change often becomes connected to identity. Again, I've talked about this before. If you have a client who identifies with being the overweight, under-motivated, baby sister, it's really important that they challenge that identity, or at least challenge that belief, right? And some of the reframe in how they talk about what they're going to be doing for their health and wellness is really important, right? Instead of saying things like, I'm trying to exercise versus I'm someone who takes care of my body, right? I'm trying to exercise is like a vague, very kind of open-ended option, right? No. I'm not trying to exercise. I am someone who prioritizes my health and wellness and takes care of my body. That is very different, right? Those identity shifts have very distinct differences. And the way that we talk to ourselves drives some of our habits, behaviors, and discipline, right? Someone might say, I'm just trying to eat healthier versus I'm someone who prioritizes my health, or I'm someone who fuels my body with good energy and quality nutrients. Have your clients be very specific about what they are going to be committing to and what their habits are going to be creating, because it's very important that that self-talk kind of reinforces their behaviors, and then the behavior then reinforces more positive self-talk. Okay. You can ask your clients, like, who do you want to become in this process? What do you want to become? Who do you want to become? What small actions are going to reinforce that identity? If you want to become a fit, energetic, really joyful 52-year-old in your postmenopausal years, what do we have to do, right, to create that person? What behaviors do you have to adopt to be that person? That person does very different things than the very low motivated, non-energetic, sluggish, low mood person in their mid 50s, right? They're doing very different things. So every action becomes a vote for the person that you want to become. And helping clients to see this, because sometimes I think as coaches, because we do this, it can feel intuitive to us, like, duh, they should have already thought of this. But it's not necessarily intuitive to everybody, especially if they've never kind of sat with some of the places that this stuff kind of hides, right? And that is what your job is as a coach, is to kind of bring some of this to life. Okay. Next, I've talked about small wins, why I love small wins. And so I'm going to talk about them again, why I think when it comes to the psychology of habit, why small wins matter. And clients will often aim too big too quickly. Oftentimes they can think that they need to do big things to get big results, right? That is not always the case. Small wins and small actions will oftentimes build the confidence that the client needs to keep going. The confidence then builds momentum. If we can see small wins, short wins at the beginning, that oftentimes leads to more motivated feelings, and then the choice to create more disciplinary behaviors. They start to, walk for 10 minutes after meals, and they realize they're not as tired and they sleep better. Okay. So now they're walking after every meal. They're creating those new behaviors. They feel more motivated to be more disciplined with doing the things that make them feel better. But if you shoot too high and they have to bite off more than they can chew initially, they may not stick with it long enough to get the small win that creates the confidence that builds the momentum. Okay, so really important. Examples of this might be, instead of asking your client to work out for 60 minutes every day, and that's kind of like a loose, they could do it for 60 minutes all at once. They could do 2 30-minute workouts, right? Instead of saying just exercise for 60 minutes, what if you tell them you want them to walk for 10 to 15 minutes after dinner? I want you to take a walk for 10 to 15 minutes after dinner. Well, I can't do that. Okay, let's do 10 to 15 minutes when you wake up. Great, I can do that. Good. Getting the client to be really honest about what they can and cannot commit to is important, right? But create very small, achievable wins first on, because that's going to then lead to more motivation, which leads to better discipline, more confidence, and more momentum, okay? Another one, might be, I want you to, take out all processed foods. Maybe we start with just adding more vegetables at dinner, right? Or start every day with a smoothie. Kind of fix one meal and just let them see that they're capable of it. Some people just need to know, I can do this. It's no different than a child, right? Create an environment where they can win, and then they start believing in themselves. Even though these are adults, okay, they still can have belief systems that stem from childhood about what they can and cannot do, or what they are and are not worthy of. Really important to understand that just because you have an adult sitting in front of you doesn't mean they have all the tools in the toolbox. Okay, this is what differentiates a coach who gets really great outcomes and maybe a coach who doesn't. Okay. And again, small doesn't mean insignificant. So a small win, a small behavioral shift does not mean insignificant. If you are even moving a little bit forward at a time, you are creating change, you are creating impact. That creates confidence, more momentum, and that leads to better long-term, very significant outcomes. Okay. The discipline and behavioral stuff has to be simple to start, and then you build on it when the client realizes, man, this is working and I'm feeling a whole lot better. All right. Obstacles that you might commonly see, okay, to some habit changes or behavioral changes to discipline, the all or nothing mindset, right? I have to do it all or I'm going to do nothing at all, right? They might kind of like mess up one day and they think, oh, the whole week is a wash because Saturday just wasn't good. So I'm going to like forget it all on Sunday too. That all or nothing thinking. And I can dive into some of these and what I would do about them in another episode. So I'll just kind of list them for now. But perfectionism, right? This is the client that's like, if it's not perfect, I'm not going to do it. But we know perfection is the enemy of progress. It always has been. It always will be. If you are waiting for the perfect time to do anything, you will stall in your progress. There is no perfect time. There might be better times, but there's no perfect time. Things come up. Life happens. If we are waiting for perfection, we are stalling on progress. Unrealistic expectations sometimes clients can have. They think that they should lose 10 pounds in 1 week, or their bloating should be gone after following a sensitive gut guide for 10 days, right? So setting realistic expectations is important and not allowing clients to form unrealistic ones. Another challenge could be environment working against the client. I've had clients over the years, more like in my personal training days, where I was trying to get them to kind of clean up some of their habits and their nutrition. It was very common actually with several of my older female clients who had husbands who loved to go out to dinner and, have multiple glasses of wine at dinner. They were very successful. They were at the point in their life where they could do that. Their kids were out of the house. And it was hard for some of these women to say no to their husbands, ask for time to not be going out and to not be, socializing so much. They wanted time to just hang home, take care of their health a little bit. And so if the environment is working against the client, that's something that, could certainly be an obstacle to what you're trying to achieve. And then last one would be clients who kind of spiral into shame after setbacks. So there's one little setback and they spiral into shame. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. This isn't working. I don't know what's wrong with me, right? And looking out for that, because shame is a very powerful emotion. It is a very kind of spiraling emotion where it can get deeper the longer you stay there. So kind of be looking out for some of those potential obstacles and reframing their obstacles as not failure, but data. Okay. Why did it go this way? What did the client learn? What did you learn? What adjustments can the clients make? What adjustments could you make to their plan? What adjustments could you make to the presentation of the information and what you want them to do and how big or how small it is? So there really is no such thing as failure if you look at it as data as to what is working and what is not. All right, practical kind of habit challenge. Okay, choose one habit for your client. Okay. Or you could even do it for yourself. So if you chose a habit, right, and ask yourself, how can I strengthen it this week? Try it for yourself first before you ask a client to do it. So kind of examples is, okay, maybe you have the habit, and obviously this would be maybe for a good habit. You could strengthen a good habit, or you could find a habit that isn't exactly serving you and decide kind of how to shift it. So I don't know, let's say the habit is, you always want dessert after dinner. Okay. Let's just say there's a physiological component to that, right? Which like blood sugar is not stable. But let's just say that that's the habit. Okay. So let's talk about what is the cue, right? Find the cue to your habit. And then after you do this for yourself, you can do it for your clients, or you can suggest that they do this. Find the cue, right? I'm just always used to eating dessert. I'm someone who always needs dessert. Okay. What reward am I looking for? Am I looking for comfort? Am I looking for a treat? Am I looking for a reward? Okay. How can I make this smaller? Or how does this connect to who I want to become? So maybe instead of like needing a treat, that is sugar or ice cream, maybe the treat can be that you buy yourself a really nice tea. Maybe it's a tea from Europe that feels really special to sip, or you get yourself a really nice mug. Or maybe you like to, have something cold to drink. So you get a beautiful glass. This is going to sound silly, but like nugget ice elevates any cold drink, right? So maybe get yourself a nugget ice maker so that your cold drinks feel really kind of special. Maybe you get yourself some glass straws. How can you make it to be a habit that both serves the feeling? Okay, so I need a treat. I've had a long day. I deserve a treat, right? That's true. That can be true. What can you replace the not so productive choice with for something else that's going to serve you better, right? Get yourself a beautiful glass straw, and put something in it like cherry juice and cherry extract with sparkling water. Okay, now we have some melatonin support for bedtime. It looks pretty. It might feel special. The glass straw in your glass makes a little almost like chime sound, right? You can shift the choices and the behaviors to still create and support the feeling. And the awareness is really the most important part. So when your clients go, oh yeah, that's so weird. I have been thinking that I need to reward myself. Like my glass of wine at the end of the day is my reward. But are you actually giving yourself something that is good? Is that a true reward for your body? If you want to become someone who's healthy, strong, motivated, focused, sleeps really well, no, you're not rewarding that person. If you wanted to reward that person, you would give your body something that fueled sleep, focus, and health. So just reframe it. You can still have the treat. You just want it to be something that is more aligned with the person you are wanting to become. Okay, kind of in closing here, habits that stick, okay, are rarely built through pressure and perfection. So if you are pressuring your client to be perfect, if they're pressuring themselves to be perfect, those habits aren't going to stick. They're coming from a place of lack, of shame, of fear. If I don't do this, then that. You want habits to come from confidence, from self-esteem, from the proof that it's working and I'm feeling better. Okay. They're oftentimes built much more long-term through awareness, repetition, small actions, and that are repeated long enough to become part of who we are. This is why Dr. Cabral loves the 21-day time frame, right? That is a long enough, that's been studied as a time period where habits can change in the brain. 21-day detox, a lot of people, it's really hard for 7 days to just automatically shift how someone's going to eat forever. They do the detox for 21 days. You can bet that their choices from a habit standpoint become very different if they only did the detox for 7 days. So longer, consistent repetition, awareness, action change is essentially what becomes part of who they are, rather than them white knuckling their way through better choices because of a lack mindset or a fear mindset. Okay. I hope you found this episode helpful. It might be helpful for you, might be helpful. Certainly, I hope it's helpful for you in coaching your clients. But I think we all can think about habits that we have. And if we understand kind of the psychology behind them, why we do them and how we can shift them and what that means for our long-term goals, I think it's a really important part of kind of that overall health and wellness mindset. Okay, thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back with you for another episode real soon.